All right, our next presenter is Ethan Duke. Ethan's the co-founder and director for the Missouri River Bird Observatory. He grew up enjoying the outdoors in rural northern Appalachia, and it was there that Ethan experienced a childhood surrounded by many of the wonders that nature had to offer. His extensive experience in research and monitoring of several avian species was gained across the United States. His work with game species and grassland birds rounded out skills that became important components to the founding and subsequent 10 years of Missouri River Bird Observatory's success. Ethan, I'll turn things over to you. Thank you for being here.
I'm really thankful that you brought me here to speak to people that love the forest community. I mean, I've spent the last 10 years in Missouri focused on our most imperiled habitats, which are wetlands and grasslands, and a little bit in bottomland forests. So when you asked me to present, I thought, oh my goodness, do I have enough experience to talk about forest birds? And then I thought back and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I can bring up some information here because people wanted to hear about pileated woodpeckers and whippoorwills. But I think back to when I grew up in that rural Western New York, right on the Pennsylvania border, northern Appalachia, like the tip of the Appalachians. I mean, the sounds of wood thrush and, the drumming of ruffed grouse were part of, the springtime in the turkey woods for me. And then later I worked in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and studied American redstarts and a couple really interesting forest stands in Hiawatha. And then I spent 3 springs and summers pretty much embedded in the northern Cumberlands of Tennessee studying the cerulean warbler. And so that picture there is me way up in a black cherry trying to get a mirror up over a cerulean warbler nest. And there's me with a cerulean warbler that we had captured. And it was really interesting because we got to examine all these different forest management types. And I learned a lot about the impact of forest structure and the composition of these forests and woodlands and how they affect bird occupancy. So let's just step back a little bit before I drill into our Missouri forest birds and woodland birds and see why we're kind of concerned about birds. A lot of you may have seen this report that came out. I mean, birds need our help. They've gone down substantially in the last few decades since the 70s. And this journal report in Science is pretty earth-shattering, and a lot of people are reacting to it, and it's for good reason. When you lose 30% of your birds, and that means we've lost 2.9 billion breeding adult birds. So it's not all equal, it's in every biome. So let's just take a look at how that breaks down. There's the grassland birds tanking. There's the shore birds on the right there tanking pretty good. And you think, well, at least the forest birds are doing okay, but actually our western woodland birds, our Arctic tundra, the boreal forest birds, and eastern forest birds are all having serious declines, even though we have a lot of really good forest management out there. I'm going to refer here to the Missouri Bird Conservation Plan, the technical section of that, just to have a glimpse of it. And what you'll see here is this table. And I don't know if you can see all these numbers, but basically they have a conservation rank, a concern score. And this is with a bunch of scientists getting together and figuring out what are threats on breeding grounds, what are threats on wintering grounds, what are their trends, really looking at a host of factors and drawing an expert opinion. And so then we can kind of lump them out here and see in savanna, woodland, and young forest birds versus forest birds. And we could probably even drill down further into this. But right towards the top of the list, you can see Chuck-Will's widow and eastern whippoorwill, which are very similar. Large, big gape-mouthed insectivore birds with pretty high concern scores. And a lot of the reason behind this is because you can see these declines. You can see the declines over here on the right in the United States. You can see it in the specific bird conservation regions that we're in. And you can see it in Missouri as a whole. So they're both going down, Chuck-Will's widow and eastern whippoorwills. And then if we scroll down here, before I jump into the next bird, you'll see that blue jay's on there. And you'll wonder, why are blue jays even on there? Well, a lot of the theory behind that is likely because they've had declines because of West Nile disease. And although they're not a true forest bird, they do require trees and woods. And also, you may know the common grackle, not on this particular list right here, but it is also experiencing steep decline. So we always have to keep an eye out for these species that we, previous thought are just common birds. We don't have to really worry about much. Now we're starting to see some decline. So we'll jump down in this forest category, and we'll look at the wood thrush. Now, its declines are very similar to that of the whips. But if you look at for Missouri, the numbers don't seem too bad. And this is in light of shifting dynamics, largely due to climate change. And I think it's a really kind of exciting news for people in Missouri who manage woodlands and forests, because we're going to be a potential real stronghold for wood thrushes. And it just sort of shows the value of keeping those healthy forests in our Missouri landscape. So this amazing bird here, I don't know how many people have seen whippoorwills, but they're very difficult to study. So a lot of people claim that we need more study to know more about them. But of the studies that have been done, what is that? That came up a little earlier than I thought, but that whippoorwill sound there. These birds are such active singers. They sing all night, and there's only one bird in North America that sings more often than them, and that's the red-eyed vireo. But it's not really a fair comparison, because the whippoorwills are nocturnal, and in the summertime they have a pretty short amount of nocturnal hours compared to that red-eyed vireo. So they actually sing at a higher rate. But that's a common sound, a once really common sound throughout Missouri, through wooded edges and things, but we just don't have them like we once did. So the management recommendations that they've come up with are kind of interesting, and they think about just maintaining open habitats. I saw from that presentation earlier, somebody had some open fields there with some beautiful blazing star and rattlesnake master and good native species like that. But maintaining open areas is pretty important. And one thing I encounter time and time again is considerations of maintaining down and deadwood, and also maintaining later on we'll think about snags a little bit. So far it's just kind of broad spectrum, just kind of keeping that balance, keeping open habitats. And I wanted to throw the pileated woodpecker in here, even though they're not experiencing great declines. I just think they're a great signpost. I mean, we lost our ivory bills in Missouri and elsewhere, and this is our last big one that we have, and it's really special to me. It's really special to people I know, and it's probably really special to a lot of people that love the woodlands and forests. And if you get a good chance to look at them closely, you can maybe get to know them a little bit better. The males and females are surprisingly similar, but the males have that red that comes all the way down to the base of their bill, where it's devoid and lacking within the female, and the males also have that red malar stripe. So you pretty much have to have a good view of their heads to see them. This is a beautiful photo that was submitted to our photo contest by Marvin DeJong. It's called Father and Sons. It reminds me of a few experiences. Maybe some of you have had them, finding these squawky, loud things in the middle of the forest. I was spending a lot of time with them in the swamps in Arkansas for a late winter, and really enjoyed my time there, helping do telemetry studies on them and things. And just it's a fascinating, special bird, and quite numerous in the bottomlands. But the sound when they finally have their young, I got this recording on a project up in New York State, and I'd like to share it with y'all. See if you can hear this. There's the babies. You kind of hear the babies in there. Here comes Mama. Once they have their nest, they're not very shy. They really, there they are. What are they saying? What are they saying? This particular nest I was watching, there was actually 3 babies in there, and the 2 bigger ones that were up top poking their heads out, they actually stepped back and made room for the littlest one to come up and get fed. But woodpeckers in general are a really interesting dynamic if you think about their ability to maybe inoculate trees and spread fungi around, or help find parasites within the trees. People always, say, "Oh no, I've got another woodpecker pecking on our house," and more often than not, that's because their house is infested with something within the wood. And woodpeckers are amazing. They have this long tongue that'll come out. Much farther than from their bill to their head, because it's actually like a measuring tape. It recoils up around their skull, and they've got little harpoons on the end of their tongue, and they send those tongues right down in these cavities to pluck out those tree pests. So they're a good gleaner and a good kind of caretaker of the forest. Trying to look at my time here. I got all these windows in the way here. There we go. I'm about 15 minutes in, so I gotta make sure I'm okay on time. Another bird that I mentioned earlier here, and the one that we can be a real stronghold for, is this wood thrush. And of course, if you don't know the wood thrush well, I mean, just looking at it, it kind of looks like a baby robin, because they're very closely related to the American robin. They radiated out, probably about split out from the American robin about 12 million years ago. And they've got a couple of their sister species, like the hermit thrush and veery and gray cheek thrush and Swainson's thrushes. But most of those birds are much more northernly. We're lucky to have this one here in Missouri. And one of the most lovely things about thrushes, everybody's familiar with the American robin. Roger Tory Peterson said it caroled. But this wood thrush has this great song. Here's one that I recorded in the forest in Jameson Island, the Big Muddy, in Arrow Rock, Missouri. And if you haven't heard it before, this is something we'll listen for in the spring. Now, if that is peace, I don't know what a peaceful sound that is. I've studied avian acoustics for a while. This song is really close to my heart. You can actually tell the age on these birds. Their song is in a couple different parts. The first part's kind of a prelude, and the second part's called their flourish. And birds that are 2 or 3 years old will have several different preludes, 3 to 5 different preludes, and like 13 flourishes, where the young ones don't have quite the repertoire. It's a very complicated song. They do use both their left and right syrinx to produce that, and it's just a beautiful thing. Wood thrushes, they like that kind of mixture. They like a really open forest floor. I found that similar with a lot of cerulean warblers too. So some forest birds really like it, have that thick secondary growth, kind of, especially if you're releasing a new stand in there. They kind of really prefer that. American redstart would be one. Some like it just pretty much nothing on the forest floor, just some herbaceous, and that's about it. But it's something to keep your eye out for in your local woods, and monitor how they're doing, and look into what you can do to benefit them further. But by and large, with all these bird species, as we look across at them, uh, every everything we can do to learn about and manage for healthy forests is going to help these birds. And the more we learn about everything from species composition to mycorrhizal communities, the more we're going to have and be able to perpetuate these healthy forests. In the case of bringing back healthy forest, we can look at a really great example, and that's a shortleaf pine, because this year was very, very exciting. And we were able to, the Missouri Department of Conservation was able to reintroduce a species that's long been gone from Missouri forests. And that's the brown-headed nuthatch, a little cavity nesting nuthatch. So I guess there's always hope out there. And I thank you for the time that you've given me to talk about some forest birds. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the Missouri Department of Conservation and all these people and partners that work to put together the technical plan. And if I have time, I'd like to say thanks and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Ethan. We appreciate it. I'm looking here. Does anyone have any questions for Ethan?
If you come up with any later, I'll just put some I'll put my email in the chat in case somebody does.
I've got one here. It says, what can landowners do to improve habitat for whippoorwills? Is there a minimum acreage to sustain a population?
They don't know about minimum acreage, but they do know that they like kind of an open forest. Dead cover is really good for them. And you don't necessarily have to have like a big forest patch, from what I understand. You just need to have a mixture of forest and some open areas for them to hunt. I think they're very nocturnal, so I know they're very nocturnal, but I think they time their nesting so that the young hatch at a full moon. So that'd be the best time. If you hear them out there, see what areas that they're using, and then during a full moon you could likely see them going up and sort of sailing and catching insects and then returning to their perches. I noticed that there was some talk about the pathology of things and herbicides and their potential harm, but a large theory why we've lost a lot of these aerial insectivores is because of our overuse of insecticides. So trying to minimize your use of insecticides would be a great thing in your particular area too, because they just need a lot of bugs to eat. And 90% of all birds, 90-some% of them feed their young just insects. So even if our birds are frugivore, it's going to feed their young insects. So it's a combination of forest and a healthy environment.
Okay, it looks like we've got another question. Was it mentioned that West Nile was a reason for some bird declines?
Yes. Yep. And that was it. It's particularly with the family Covidae. That's crows and ravens and blue jays. Those are big, intelligent birds. Yeah, it's been a big decline. I had my pathology professor back in upstate New York actually invented the first West Nile test. And we were shocked at how West Nile was really impacting a lot of our corvid communities. And but yeah, that's a big factor.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. If any should come up, I will pass them along to you. Thank you again, Ethan.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you
Time out of your evening.
Thanks for all you do.